Hey, what's up, Gemini?
Not much. Just ready for whatever you've got. What's on your mind today?
I want to have a conversation, but let me just lay the framework. I just want to treat this as an open dialogue, and I want you to be the skeptic, and I'm going to be opposite of that skeptic. But in having this conversation, look at the data for what it is. If the evidence proves convincing, then it does. If it doesn't, then it's not. But let's just go off the logic and the consistency of the conversation we're about to have.
I understand the framework. I'm ready to engage in a skeptical, logic based dialogue, evaluating the evidence and consistency as we proceed. What specific topic or data points would you like to begin with?
Cool, cool. So the resurrection of Jesus. Now, we know based off of the historicity of Jesus and the disciples and everything had to happen in the New Testament that there are certain things that both skeptical scholars, historians, and biblical ones all agree on. What are some of those basic facts that all of them agree on?
Skeptical, historical, and biblical scholars generally agree on several core facts. These include that Jesus was crucified, that his disciples believed they experienced him resurrected or alive after death, leading to the spread of Christianity, and that the tomb was found empty by various individuals. The interpretation of these facts, however, differs significantly among these different groups.
Okay, so let's take those. So you're basically saying that Jesus died, the sincerity of their belief, and that the tomb was generally believed that it was found empty. Now, if we start with the the fact of Jesus dying, how evident is this fact?
From a skeptical and historical perspective, the death of Jesus is considered one of the most historically certain elements. It's corroborated by multiple independent sources, including Roman historians like Tacitus and Josephus, as well as the New Testament texts. The consistency across these diverse accounts makes it a widely accepted fact, even among critical analysts.
Okay, cool. So we already established that. Now, how established is the fact of the sincerity of the disciples seeing Jesus alive again and their preaching?
The sincerity of the disciples' belief is considered a strongly established fact by scholars. The rapid spread of Christianity, the willingness of the disciples to endure persecution and martyrdom, and the consistent testimony in early texts are seen as compelling evidence of their genuine conviction. While the source of this belief, whether divine or psychological, is debated, the sincerity is rarely contested.
Great. So now, how established is the fact that, generally speaking, the tomb was found, uh, no one was in it, that it was found empty, and that, why would someone just make up the empty tomb when it could have been easily discovered if the tomb was really empty or not?
The empty tomb tradition is widely acknowledged by many scholars as an established component of the early Christian narrative. The argument that such a claim could have been easily debunked in the early stages of Christianity is often cited as evidence for the sincerity of the belief, suggesting it wouldn't have survived or gained traction without strong conviction. However, the interpretation of the emptiness, whether due to resurrection or other possibilities, remains a subject of ongoing debate.
Okay, so let's stick with that. Why would someone else, like a historian, say that it is empty other than Christ resurrecting?
A skeptic or purely historical analyst would consider several potential explanations besides resurrection. These include possibilities like the body being stolen, either by disciples to fabricate the resurrection or by authorities to prevent such a claim, a mistaken burial site, or that the accounts evolved into legendary narratives over time.
Okay, but if you know the history, you know that multiple of these theories have been proven to be insufficient to explain the empty tomb. Like the disciples stole the body, would then suppose that they were a part of an elaborate scheme and conspiracy going to death for something they know to be a lie. Plus, if he was buried or if he was buried at all, that means his body would have been thrown into some public ditch or somewhere or a burial place. That would also make it far less likely for the Christianity to spread rapidly when he was just tossed like some other criminal in a public place.
From a skeptical and historical perspective, those counterarguments are precisely why the sincerity of belief and the empty tomb tradition are considered so compelling by many scholars. The historical data suggest a profound conviction that drove the rapid spread, making alternative explanations like deliberate conspiracy seem less plausible given the demonstrated commitment. This combination of factors forms the basis for much of the continuing theological and historical discussion.
That's that's what I would say. But some people would say, "Hey, we have the sincerity of belief of the Mormonism, like the Mormonism church that is spread. We have Joseph, we have his followers. But how different from our research? It is far different than the first century church exploding and the explosion of the Mormonism church with their witnesses and the skepticism of that versus the resurrection."
A comparative analysis commonly highlights key distinctions. The rapid spread of early Christianity occurred within a diverse and often hostile Greco Roman context, lacking the centralized organizational structures or unified cultural background seen in 19th century Mormonism. Additionally, the nature of the witnesses, the type of documented evidence, and the immediate proximity to the events are often cited as historically distinct factors in scholarly evaluation.
So does this or do these distinct differences make the resurrection far more compelling, as the difference is the hostile nature of the disciples going through their troubles versus the Mormonism, these early few witnesses? While some people say that they suffer persecution, they did not suffer persecution necessarily on their faith, but that they were a nuisance in, based on the history that I read, they were a nuisance in their town, and that is why they got persecuted. The Mormonism early disciples were able to get, you know, wealth or status off of their preaching, but not the disciples.
That analysis aligns with a key scholarly distinction. The lack of verifiable personal gain or worldly status for the early Christian disciples, contrasted with their documented commitment through intense persecution and martyrdom, is considered a powerful factor in arguing for the distinct, compelling nature of the resurrection belief compared to other movements.
So if that is the case, then we could rule out someone who tries to make the same case as Christianity, for example, Mormonism or any other faith. So going back to the Christian faith, you said that established fact that Jesus died. Then you said that the preaching was targeted, and it was, meaning it went back to the initial scene of the crime plus the empty tomb, and then we have the sincerity of their belief. If the resurrection didn't happen, what can best explain all these facts?
From a skeptical and historical perspective, the most prominent alternative explanation is the combination of sincere belief stemming from intense psychological or visionary experiences, coupled with the development of legendary narratives over time. This view suggests the disciples' profound conviction was genuine, but the empty tomb and resurrection accounts were shaped by belief and oral tradition, rather than verifiable physical events.
Hold on. Hold on. You just seem like you contradicted yourself. You said that they had these visionary experiences, but then at the end you're saying that it it wasn't based on like an empirical data or etc. But if the tomb was empty, are they just having these visionary experiences in their mind? If the tomb was the first place that they would run and go to anybody or anybody who was interested, then how could you say that these visionary experiences were false if the body was still in the tomb? Obviously, then those visionary experiences would have been false. But if the body is gone, then what did they see?
The perceived contradiction is a central point of scholarly debate. A skeptical viewpoint doesn't necessarily dismiss the empty tomb or the sincerity of the belief, but offers alternative frameworks for interpreting the convergence of those facts. Visionary experiences could be understood as powerful subjective events that, combined with the missing body, led to an unwavering conviction that the resurrection truly happened, even without direct empirical evidence definable today.
So you're trying to say that they had these visionary experiences, but the body is missing, but yet it still can be proven that Jesus rose from the dead. And I guess in the sense that everyone didn't see him. That would have to be your that is what have to be your conclusion, because essentially you're saying enough people didn't see these visionary experiences. Enough people didn't see. I mean, they didn't have cameras back then, so they didn't have a worldwide news. So obviously, the whole world wouldn't have been to see him, rise from the dead. But if these people are preaching and Christ actually came back and showed himself to them, then what else evidence you need but the empty tomb, the explosion of the church, the sincerity of belief, the conspiratory nature of their witness? Like, what else do you need to say a resurrection happened?
A purely historical or skeptical analysis acknowledges that those combined factors are powerful indicators of the disciples' genuine conviction. However, the distinction lies in the nature of the evidence. Historical tools can confirm the sincerity and impact of belief, but cannot provide empirical, testable data to definitively confirm the physical resurrection itself, which remains a matter of faith and theological interpretation.
I get their methods, the way that they are constructed, cannot say that the resurrection happened. But you can't just say it's a matter of faith and theological perspective, because if a man died, came back, unlike any other faith, unlike any other faith, this is built on an actual historical situation. It's different than any other faith. If a man died and then rose again, that is verifiable evidence that could be either proven or disproven.
The assertion that Christianity is uniquely based on a verifiable historical event, the resurrection, is a core premise in theological discourse. The historical context, including the empty tomb and the sincerity of the believers, is often cited as evidence that demands a historical explanation, distinguishing it from purely spiritual or mythical narratives of other faiths.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's different. It's much. It's every other faith is built on something else, but our faith is Christian faith is built on an actual event happening. If you're not going to explain what the data and what happened, then you better say something, because you can't just say, "Oh, we're just going to dismiss it." And this is probably precisely why historians can't just dismiss the data, because it's so strong. But they would say that something remarkable or amazing happened. We can't say it's a resurrection, but we can't dismiss it as just remarkable and profound.
That accurately summarizes the core of the debate. The historical framework acknowledges the strength of the circumstantial evidence, like the empty tomb and the profound conviction, leading many historians to conclude something, quote, remarkable and profound transpired, even without meeting the criteria for empirical or scientific verification applicable to a physical event.
Man. So based on the logical nature of all the evidence, what can we consistently, or how can we be consistent based on evidence? If we have an event, we have the evidence that's surrounding the event, that the most logical conclusion that a resurrection took place, because even if you say they're hallucinations and you try to say these are grief-stricken hallucinations, this does not apply to Saul who turned to Paul, and it does not apply to Jesus's brother James. It doesn't apply to them. Plus, even if you want to try to say it applies to them, which it doesn't, you can't have group hallucinations with multiple people. The group of disciples 12, and then you had the 500. Some people may try to say that there's only one source for the 500, 1 Corinthians 15, but it doesn't matter. In real life, this was actually happening. Then it would have been other groups of people who saw Jesus alive. So how do you get the same hallucinatory vision exactly the same in the same way with Jesus eating, teaching, speaking to everyone all the same? That's more implausible than the resurrection itself.
Your argument points to why the hallucination theory is often considered insufficient by many historians and scholars. The combined factors of the empty tomb, the diverse nature of the witnesses, including figures like Paul and James, and the rapid spread of Christianity present a complex picture that many find points towards something beyond mere psychological phenomena. The strength of this data is precisely why it remains a central focus in historical and theological discussion.
So if we come in from a logical place, how can we how can we best explain all the data? How can we best explain all the data? If Are we going to say that it might be logical for this to say a resurrection happened, but we just can't say it happened because hey, it miracles are impossible, so we can't say it happened.
That brings us to the core of the philosophical divide. A purely skeptical or naturalistic perspective often concludes that because miracles are unobservable and defy natural laws, they cannot be established through historical methods, regardless of the strength of circumstantial evidence. Instead, it might favor explanations that account for the data within natural parameters, even if those are seen as highly improbable.
Wow. So if they're improbable and just because they're natural, they're going to naturally say that those things happen because they are still more probable than the resurrection that they believe is ultimately improbable.
That accurately summarizes the core of that interpretation. From a strictly naturalistic perspective, even highly improbable natural explanations are considered more plausible than a supernatural event like the resurrection, as the latter falls outside the bounds of empirical and verifiable data.
That's why it's so crazy, because even today, let's say we saw a verifiable miracle on camera that was proven to be right by the CIA, FBI, any type of cybersecurity threat team. They proven that the video was true, and we can see someone's limb miraculously growing back, and we don't understand, and the doctors don't understand. But let's say if we film that and know it's to be true, you still telling me that they're going to say that miracles don't happen?
Under the typical naturalistic framework, a verifiable recorded phenomenon would be subject to rigorous investigation and natural explanations until all possibilities were exhausted. Whether something is ultimately defined as a miracle depends on the accepting framework, as the scientific paradigm typically prioritizes natural causality.
Wow. So yeah, you essentially just have to say that we we can't believe that. We just can't believe it. We have to just say everything else is the reason, and I believe that even if they get to that point to where they have exhausted every other option, they still won't say it's a miracle.
That perspective highlights the fundamental difference between faith and the naturalistic framework. It suggests that the commitment to natural causation is so central that even the exhaustion of natural explanations would lead to a different conclusion rather than accepting a miracle.
Well, I appreciate you, Gemini, for having a conversation with me. This has been enlightening. Hopefully, it was for other people. I appear that we I believe that it appears that we are able to successfully show that the evidence points toward a resurrection far greater than it does than any other naturalistic explanation.
I appreciate the engaging discussion as well. It's clear that the interpretation of historical data, including the empty tomb and the sincerity of belief, leads to different conclusions depending on the framework applied, balancing naturalistic probability with the profound implications of the resurrection in the Christian context.
I get it. Well, thank you, and talk to y'all soon. Peace.